because of the complexity that we sustain, the complexity that we hold. So, oh my God, like, I was like, what's going on? No wonder. Like, I'm like looking over here and I'm like, why is nobody talking on the other thing? It's because I totally forgot to go live there. That's why. Now I'm live there. So, okay, now we can get back to what we're talking about. See, this is why I have to like get myself collected so that I know what I'm doing from one moment to the next. The idea of, I have to figure out what else. Oh, yeah. Not everyone in this reality, not everyone in a physical body, not everyone with a human mind has the ability or the capacity to grasp and understand certain things, because energy is a huge factor. For example, there are some people who will not grasp certain spiritual wisdoms or certain spiritual knowledge. And this is something that I've had to accept over the last few weeks, because this is what I was told by Aja, my soul, that not everyone is made the same, and that we all have unique capacities. We all have the potential to do the same things. We just we're not all coming in with the same abilities, And I'm not talking about like psychic abilities. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the understanding of information, the ability to integrate information. When I am having an experience and I'm walking, just taking a walk, for me, it's not just a walk. For me, it is a opportunity to connect with Source and with God. And it is a reminder. Everywhere I look, I see patterns. Everywhere I look, I see details that represent something. So whenever certain things happen on certain days in my walk, and certain events happened earlier that day, I only see it as communication from Source. I see the little messages that I'm given all the time. And so whenever I am opening my mind to different scenarios and situations, I'm not just paying attention to like what's happening then and there in the moment. I'm also understanding the energy around it. I'm understanding what it represents, what it means. And that is not something that is easily that people do. People don't do that very often. That's not to say, oh my God, Ferny, I'm so special. It's a skill. It's a way of being very receptive, and it's almost spherical in your comprehension of things. Some people are very focused on like everyday stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with nature or have anything to do with the little details that are around them. So for myself, when I am having a walk and I'm connecting with Source or with God or Divine, I'm not just having a walk. I'm having a full experience. And that's something that I've had to build myself up to for some time now. And it may not have all just occurred in this lifetime. Some of it may be based in past lives. Here's an example of this. I once had a life where I don't even know when this would be, but what I remember from that lifetime is that I was part of a class of people that from the moment we were born, we basically were like assigned to the type of work we were going to be doing for the rest of our lives. It's kind of like a caste system, but it wasn't the traditional caste system that we may know about that is based in the East. But this was like a type of class of people. The moment you were born, depending on your the signs or the astrology or the family that you came from, you were basically like plugged in to the people or the work that you were going to be doing for the rest of your life. So in that lifetime, I was taken from my family as a child, and I became part of the royal court. And in that court, there was an older male who I was assigned to, essentially, and he was supposed to teach me everything that he knew. He was a master in his field, and everything that he was doing, I at some point in the future would be doing, and that would be my role, my responsibility. And it was kind of a chemist. You can call it alchemist or an alchemy, because it was almost a mix of like substances that produce certain things. There were certain like potions for healing, but there was also these like special tasks that they had to give At that time, what I remember was the Maharaja. So we were tasked to serve the Maharaja. And whenever he was in public or he was in a public place, there was supposed to be the element of divinity. Some of the elements of divinity were fireworks or these effects with certain chemicals and certain fireworks and etc. And it was almost like a form of mysticism, but it was also a form of magic. And so I was tasked to this master, and he was supposed to teach me everything he knew. In this lifetime, that master was my grandfather. So my grandfather in that lifetime, he was that person. And I understand now why. I didn't realize it at the time when I was having this memory. So I was sent to him. He started to show me everything that he knew, and I became the master that took over when he died. And so whenever, again, the Maharaja was out, the family was out, or whatever, we had to create the effect so that people believed that these kings and rulers and royal people were magical, were divine, were godly. Was part of the act. This was part of keeping them in power. And I was very good at what I did. And I remember at one point in my memory recall that there was an area in I don't know if it was a palace or just the compound, but there was an area in the compound where I would go up and I could see over and I could see into the center, like one of the central areas of the city, the main city. And there was a temple there. And in one of the city that I was in, or the city that I lived in at the time, there was a temple in the middle. And in the temple, there were always sages, these kind of yogic type of people who practiced very old disciplines for connecting the spiritual mind with the mental mind with the physical body. So there was almost like a 3-part practice that they engaged in that reminded me of yoga, even though I don't know if it was actually yoga or just an old form that no longer exists. But that they would starve themselves. They didn't really take money, and they only took food, and they basically use themselves as like machines. They use themselves as these spiritual machines for people who would come to gain insight. It was almost, you can consider them kind of like the version of like the version of the Oracle at Delphi. It's kind of like that, but there were several of them. There were usually like 4 or 5 of them, and the temple was round and then it was covered. So people would come and they would give offerings to them. They would take of the offering, and then in return they would have these pieces of papyrus, and they would essentially channel energy or information, and then they would give the person a message, or they would share a wisdom with that person, and they were able to ask them about issue in their lives, but they were given the information back. It's the most interesting thing. I've never heard of anything like that. I don't know when this would have been, because I don't know the time frame. I know the idea of a Maharaja and when that would have taken place, but I don't know when or where this was. All I know is that I was, and everything seemed like there was a lot of tents. So like the place that I did all of my work in, where all of the stuff was stored and everything, there was kind of like a tent type of thing in there with a bunch of wooden tables and such. So there was a lot of that going on there. So it was a really interesting experience. But I remember in that being the master, I felt like a fraud, because I was seen at the time, in that lifetime, I was seen as like a high priest, or like a kind of like a divine like being or person myself, but it was in reverence or in support to the Maharaja and the royal family. So in that lifetime, I felt like a fraud, because even though I was considered to be this like priestly person, I wasn't to the extent, and I was more focused on just trying to make the Maharaja look great, look incredible, make him look divine, make him look godly through all these like parlor tricks and fireworks and stuff. But I remembered looking down at these wise men, these sages at the temple, and I could see people coming and, receiving their guidance and the channeled knowledge, and then leaving. And it was just an ongoing thing. And I used to look out into the temple, and I would think to myself, Like I feel like a fraud. I do not feel like a priest, or a priest, a wise priest. I feel like a fraud, but I wish I could do what they did. And I remember thinking that. I wish I could channel wisdom and knowledge and share it with others. And I desired for that. And that was in a prior lifetime. So for me to have this desire in a prior lifetime, only to have that come much more naturally in this lifetime, is kind of like a resolution to that creation. There was a creation out of that. In that moment, I created something and I put it out. And so then in this lifetime, I came in with all of the ingredients necessary to be that. And that was a karmic conclusion or karmic resolution of things. And that's how it works sometimes. Sometimes things don't happen in the lifetime you're in. Sometimes it takes lifetimes to come forward. I can even say the same thing from like the work of Christ and Jesus and the disciples and Mary Magdalene, where they embarked on work that they thought would only be for that lifetime. Little did they know that this is something that was going to carry on for generations and generations and would become an entire change and movement in this world. And regardless of how it was used, how it's manipulated, how it's been used and manipulated by people who want power or control or want to just control people or dominate and manipulate people. Regardless of that, and regardless of the Catholic Church, because they just are just a hot mess, but their work carried over, their work continued to move forward in ways that they did not foresee at the time, that they not realize at the time. And here we are, 2,000 years plus, and this is still something that is continuing to evolve. And people don't realize that there's something happening in the world today where some of the great wisdoms of our history, it's almost like there's like a test period. There's like a trial happening in some way where people who are able to expand and to understand or to connect themselves with the truths are going to essentially kind of help to shift the balance of the planet. But then you also have those who do not fully understand. They can read a passage in a book like the Bible, have no idea what they're reading, have no idea what they're talking about, have no idea what it means because they've taken it so literally and they don't have the spiritual experience and wisdom to decode or to grasp what is being shared. So they take it very literally. And so it's almost like I hate to use the word test because it's not like if you don't pass the test, you're doomed. No, not at all. It just means that there's a shift happening in our world and in our planet. There are those who will be able to move forward and to gain from the experiences that are occurring now, from the events that are happening in the world right now. And they may be able to gain in a way that is beneficial, that could create future generations of prosperous experiences in living. But there are also people who are not 100% understanding their part and their role in everything, and they are not accepting accountability or responsibility for what they've created in this reality, what they've miscreated in this reality. And then on top of that, they take the wisdom and the texts of the masters of the past and they completely misinterpret and misunderstand, thereby missing the point, thereby missing the teaching, thereby missing the lesson that it's meant to give. And so then they get stuck in a reality that is based in this idea of fear or idea of hatred or anger or resentment or whatnot, entitlement. So there's this weird thing that is happening, but it's a part of the furtherance of our race. It's the part of the furtherance of our humanity. It's been in the works forever, so now it's finally starting to kind of coalesce. And so there's when you a lot of the prophecies of the past, a lot of the things that people have written about, you have to know that they were understanding and interpreting everything from their frame of reference. So if you have someone who has never experienced or seen an airplane and suddenly they see an airplane and they lived back in the 1st century CE or AD, then they probably are not going to be very good with their descriptions, because to them it seems like something very different than how we would interpret it. So when you think about the information that you find in a lot of the ancient texts, the Hebrew Bible, some of the Torah, the Christian Bible, the Quran, all of that, when you read the material and you take it so literally, you miss an opportunity to grasp something in wisdom, something that was designed to teach, but may only be available in teaching those who may understand and have a grasp of what was there before, or what was there to start with. That's where it gets tricky. So it really can become a bit of a pain in the ass with that. So going back to what we were reading here, because I lost my train of thought here. However, the major purpose of his incarnation was not. I was talking about Freud. Freud's superego is a particularly interesting example of the real power of miscreation. It is noteworthy throughout the whole development of his theories that the superego never allied itself with freedom. The most it could do in this direction was to work out a painful truce in which both opponents lost. This perception could not fail to force him to emphasize discontent in his view of civilization. The Freudian id, or ID, id, is really only the more superficial level of the unconscious and not the deepest level at all. This too was inevitable because Freud could not divorce miracles from magic. It was therefore his constant endeavor, even preoccupation, to keep on thrusting more and more material between consciousness and the real deeper level of the unconscious, so that the latter became increasingly obscured. The result was a kind of bedlam, in which there was no order, no control, and no sense. This was exactly how he felt about it. The later theoretical switch to the primacy of anxiety was an interesting device intended to deny both the instinctive nature of destructiveness and the force of the power of miscreation. By placing the emphasis on the result, the generative nature of the power was minimized. Destructive behavior is instinctual. The instinct for creation is not obliterated in miscreation. That is why it is always invested with reality. I love that part right there. That is why it is always invested with reality. Because what that specifically says is that the reality that we can create out of our godly nature in connection and in awareness and full embodiment of love and of connectedness and of oneness. This is what I keep telling people, is that there's reminders of this everywhere. There are reminders of our true nature, of our true being in all things. It's everywhere. And people don't see it because they don't pay attention to the details. They don't see the patterns in what they're doing. They don't recognize that everything has a pattern and there's a design that exists that shows up in a lot of what we see in this world and what we experience in this world. One of the chief ways in which you can correct your own magic miracle confusion is to remember that you did not create yourself. You are apt to forget this when you became egocentric. And this places you in a position where belief in magic is virtually inevitable. Your instincts for creation were given you by your own creator, who was expressing the same instinct in his creation. Since the creative ability rests solely in the mind, and everything which you make or create is necessarily instinctive. It also follows that whatever you produce is real in your own eyes, but not necessarily in the sight of God. That's what I was talking about. There's sub-creations and then there's the creation. There's sub-realities and then there's reality. The reality is creation, is all things. It's as things are. The sub-reality are what people create and become absorbed in, which becomes its own reality unto itself. And they will experience that reality as if it's absolutely real, but they are dismissing the larger creation, the larger reality. And at some point, if there is too much, there's too much in interaction or engagement with the reality, this happens. I was like, what does that sound? There's like, it hits itself. It runs into a brick wall. People's sub-realities it can only carry on for so long before you're reminded that reality exists in a certain way. You can't fight it. You're not going to be able to change it. You can work with it and embrace it and go with it. If you create a sub-reality, you can live within that state for some time, and it's going to take a lot of energy, and you will probably experience the darker aspects of your nature and of the nature of all humanity and of all the world. But you can try to exist there for as long as you can until at some point the grander reality hits that, or you run right into that. And then all of a sudden you have to make a decision. Are you going to remain in that sub-reality and continue to miscreate, or are you going to accept the reality as it is and then try to create from that state? I'll stop there because that's a lot. And not only that, we're starting a new section anyways. And I think after the next section, I'm going to put this book down for a minute because it is a huge book. It's going to take forever to get through, but I want to read some other things as well that I think are really fascinating also. So I don't just want to stick to one material. And I love the conversations with God book as well, but I also want to focus on some other things also that are going to come up. So let me go through here and see what you guys are asking about or talking about, because I want to see what you guys are what are you sharing? Yeah, it is all for their gain. It is all for their gain. I love you too, Candy. I love you too. Hey, Roxy. Oh, Roxy's on. Biba says they let their ego take over. Yeah, because the ego is a tool. This is what I continue. I keep saying that ego is a tool. It's not like something you should destroy. People want to destroy the ego. Don't destroy the ego. That's like destroying a hammer. Like, oh my God, that's a weapon. No, it can be used as a weapon, and most people don't understand it as a tool. They use it as a weapon. Your ego can be used as a tool to overcome and to remain in integrity the conditioned perspective that you are. So for example, I'm Ferny. I was born into this body and I was conditioned and turned into Ferny by my experiences. The ego is a mechanism in my brain, a mechanism in my mind, which helps me to reinforce that as reality. That helps me to reinforce that all of those traits, all of those qualities, all of those experiences. It's what brings all of that together to form Ferny. And so the reason why I can keep Ferny going is because I use my ego versus trying to dismiss it. I went through a period where I tried to meditate the ego out of my reality. I tried to meditate. I'm going to be one with the spirit and everything. And I'm not egoless. I'm going to be egoless. Well, guess what? I had zero personality. I was like the most boring person in the world because there was nothing that I could really offer people in experience. I could only offer them regurgitation of words. So it wasn't until I made peace with the ego and embraced it and use it as a tool where I now can go back and reclaim a memory or a thought or something that I personally experienced that helps me to educate or to teach or to show what I have to show, what I have to share. So the ego can be a tool. Now, if you fuel it and feed it and make it and worship it, then yeah, you're definitely going to run into some problems there. And that's what we see a lot, especially with people who are elevated into positions of leadership or elevated into positions of greatness. They find themselves running into that ego trap where they either fall in love with the ego as a idealized version of self, and then they focus on that, which automatically will swing them into the miscreating period, or the opposite. You see ego as a tool, you hold on to it and try not to delete it. Don't cancel your ego, and then use it to your advantage. And I use my ego as an advantage, especially whenever I need to step into a position of dominance in a situation, or I need to step into a position of master teacher in a situation, or I need to step into a position where I'm setting an example by using myself as part of that example, I require the use of my ego, because without it, I don't have the confidence in myself to do it. So I use the ego as a way to have a sense of confidence, to have a sense of being me, Ferny. I use it. And so you can use it and it can totally come in handy. Yeah, everybody has their own intelligence and capabilities. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, Nostradamus is a good. Red Robin's like, what do you think of Nostradamus? Um, Yeah, I was Nostradamus. And by the way, guys, for those of you tuning in, like this isn't a personal reading time. This is our study group. So if you want a personal reading, you would have to come back when I have the scheduled times for that, which the time is the same every single week. If you go to my site, fernandomarone.com, you can see what times are available. If you follow me on Instagram, on YouTube, look for the post because it tells you what time I do that. But this is our study group time. So Nostradamus, interesting character. Nostradamus was an interesting character. He was very eccentric. And he did utilize different types of substances and drugs to help him get to that mental state so that he can grasp and see the future and experience things. The thing about it is he was also a writer, and he was also a good storyteller. And so sometimes in the way that he would talk about the future, he left it too open to interpretation. So he wasn't specific enough, or he left it too open-ended. So there's a lot of stuff that he was able to grasp and to sense of the future, but he also like shot himself in the foot because he didn't really give himself a chance to shine as much as he could have had he been a bit more like to the point, instead of trying to have everything kind of worded in code. And I understand why. I mean, he was trying to word things in a way because he was afraid that people were going to read his material and they were going to use it against their enemies, or they were going to use it in a negative way. And he didn't want to put stuff out there that was like a giveaway of what's to come, and then people could misuse that. He was trying to encode it in a way so that people who read it, who understood prophecy, who understood how symbolism plays a huge role in prophesizing the future, he was trying to word it in a way where only those who could get past that, again, get past the initial impression. Same thing as the Bible, same thing as some of these holy books. People take it at face value. They don't get past this barrier, and you have to get past that barrier to really see the depth of the material and the information. So in a way, I can understand the reasonings for why he did the way he did, how he did what he did. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, like he should have been like to the point, because you're like, you got these people obsessed with you, and people can apply what you say to like 50,000 different things, and it will seem as if you were correct. So I wonder if you were trying to use that to your advantage, or if you were just trying to encode the information so that only people that were meant to read it would read it. And by the way, people may not know this also, that the Oracle at Delphi also used substances and drugs to help her get into a state you may not know this, but where the actual platform in the area that the Oracle at Delphi would sit when people and royal individuals would come and seek counsel or guidance, there are actual vents there that are tied to volcanic gases. And so some of those gases would actually affect the mental, emotional, psychological senses. They would alter their sense of reality. They would alter and take them into an altered state of consciousness. And then they also used these leaves. I forgot what kind of leaves they were, but they would hold them under their tongues, and that would also help them to get to this altered state of reality so that they could see things in the future. Nostradamus did the same thing. But a lot of people don't know that because they just think, oh, like this person was born and they had the power to see the future, and shaky, 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 I can see the future, blah, 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 blah. Didn't work out. These are just human beings, and they were experimenting, and they were evolving in a way that helped them to be able to do these things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a trap that people run into, is trying to destroy the ego and cancel it out. Like, if you, that's like trying to, if you were a male, that's like trying to, the penis is evil, the penis is bad, the penis gives me in trouble, I'm going to chop it off. Like, why would you do that? Same thing with women. If it's as if the idea of what you came in with is a bad thing. You were designed specifically to operate in a certain way. We are like, think of us as computers. And if we're like computers, why would you get rid of the horn of a vehicle? Like, if you were designed to be a car, why would you get rid of the horn? You can use the horn. It can be an aggressive tool, or you can use it as a warning sign or as a way to get, to achieve something, which is to move something out of the way. So think of it that way. But a lot of people don't understand. We were designed in a very specific way. And unless we understand and accept that and then use all of our faculties, then we get into this ideology of we should all be perfect. Well, how can we all be perfect? Well, you can't desire sex. You can't desire human sexuality. You can't have impure thoughts. You can't be human. You can't have an ego. And there's all this stuff carried over. And I understand the idea behind that because, trying to focus on just being present and just being one with all things and just kind of allowing yourself to be in the moment, you definitely will have an experience that can help you to feel that connection to source. But you didn't come into this form to operate, to be that. You came into this form to be human, to have a human experience. And the more we fight that, the harder we make our lives. And then we buy into these extremes, like, well, I have to be this purified, sanctified human being. Okay, well, good luck with that. Tell me what you gain in this life from that. Tell me what you were able to achieve in this world for that. If it's just for yourself, then you've disconnected yourself from source, because we are all part of the divine. We're all part of source. You're turning your back on source by turning your back on us. So go off and, purify yourself, but you're not necessarily helping the rest of creation or interacting with the rest of creation. And of course, everyone's path is different, and some people need to go through that. Some people in a lifetime must go through an experience where they are alone, or they are disconnected from the rest of the world, or they are meditating and focused on just that. Maybe in a prior lifetime, that person showed little restraint and little ability to control their impulses, and they caused a lot of damage and a lot of suffering. And so maybe in the next incarnation, they decided they were going to come in with the obsession of being present and being aware of what they are doing. What better way to do that than through meditation, or than through avoiding or trying to push away the ego and focusing on this other aspect of the self? So it just depends on the person and what they're going through, what their journey is. Everybody has a different journey. Oh, thank you. The oracle, there was more than one oracle, by the way. Everybody only thinks that there was like one oracle, or the oracle at Delphi. There was various oracles, so there wasn't just one. And because they had to go through an entire process of indoctrination. But this is the same with some of the prior religions. You have people who they were tasked with understanding the wisdom of the past and grasping it from the holy books, and so they were specifically prepared for that. But then when you have an entire line of people that come along later who don't really go through those disciplines, and they just read it and take it at face value, and then they make themselves experts at it, you run into problems there, because you run into a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. The story of Adam and Eve, I mentioned this before, the story of Adam and Eve was never meant to be taken literally. It was a representation of us as source, and every character in the story of Adam and Eve was the same person, was the same being. Every character in Adam and Eve was the same being, and it was all part of who we are as humans now. So we represented an aspect of the divine, and then there was the divine, then there was all of the synchronicities. The serpent represented wisdom, represented an understanding of flexibility, of accommodating, of allowing a hidden knowledge or hidden truth to seep into the reality of the physical form, which was what ended up happening. And the reason why Adam is, focused on in that story is because, when you are connected to the emotional self, when you allow yourself the emotional self, and you're connected to that, there's an intelligence in the emotion. And women by default. That's why you will find more women to men in spiritual wisdoms or in spiritual practices, just because, and like this whole spirituality or the area of spirituality, because women are a little more flexible in their mindset or in their mental state. Just it's either because of culture or because there is a biology to it. That doesn't mean that men are not. It's just that there are more abilities that allow for that to occur with women. And so, of course, Eve would figure it out. Of course, Eve would see the wisdom in hidden truths in plain. Like, of course she would, because there is an understanding and an awareness there that doesn't all automatically translate as easily to males. So, of course, she was gonna like understand some things that he would not understand, and of course she's going to be blamed for it because, why not? But these are all representations of form, representations of the self. The characters are all representations of the same person or the same being. All right, so that's just a personal question. Um, another another thing to take into account, or another thing to take into consideration, and I'll end it here because I'm getting close to my dinner time and it's time to make dinner, which I don't even know what I want to eat for dinner today. But anyways, another thing that I want to bring to attention is that if you allow the universe to speak to you and you just stay open without needing everything to mean something specific that you would prefer it to mean, you actually will hear and see and experience a hell of a lot more, or a heavenly a lot more, than what you ever thought possible. Whenever I have made a decision about something in my mind or in my life, as soon as I make that decision, and I was talking to a client about this today, as soon as you make a decision of what you're going to do, immediately the universe will either support that decision and affirm its benefit or its value to you, or the universe will immediately begin to course correct you. Because again, we come in with plans, we come in with a chart. There's a divine path that is meant for each of us that we created for ourselves. We designed it before we entered into body. So when we are going along and in alignment with that path, then we have many miracles. We have synchronicities. We have alignments. When we go against it and we make a choice that goes against that path, that's where we run into suffering. That's where we run into these backlashes from the world or from the universe. That's when we run into the universe bitch slapping us every chance it gets, in little ways and in large ways, because it's telling you, turn around, or wrong way, change it. And what I was telling my client earlier was that it doesn't matter if you pick the wrong thing or the right thing, you're going to get corrected. You're going to get checked. It's if you stick to the wrong thing after you've been checked, that's on you, because at that point you can't blame the universe because you literally ignored it. And the client was wanting me to tell them what to do. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're accountable to yourself. You're responsible for yourself. And I'm not going to take responsibility for you. You have to deal with the consequences of your choices. So I won't make your decisions for you, but I will tell you what I see. I will tell you what is coming your way. And so I told her what I saw for her, but I said, honestly, just pick something. Because the moment you pick a path and you go down that path, you start moving in the direction of that path, the universe is going to course correct you. This is what happened to me. I know this because I've gone through this over and over and over again. This is a common thing that happens. Here's an example of this. Back when I was at Starbucks, I had been with Starbucks for 10 plus years. I had been wanting to leave Starbucks in year 3. In year 3 of me being at Starbucks, I wasn't even a shift supervisor. I was just a barista at a coffee shop in the River Oaks area. And so I wanted to leave Starbucks and do this full time. This was always my passion. This has always been my desire. But I just didn't understand how. And I was focus more on like, well, maybe someone will see me and say, oh my God, you're like, you're like the next Sylvia Brown or the next like, John Edwards or whatever. So I thought people would see me and they would be like, oh my God, you're, I'm going to turn you into, so that was the idea. Like the only way I'm going to be able to do this full time is if something like that happened. So for years, I was waiting for an angel to descend from the heavens with like a perfect way to do this full time. And I stayed with Starbucks. And throughout that entire thing, nothing ever happened. No opportunity came my way to do this. I was just like running in circles. I felt like I was running in circles. Well, while I was going through that experience, I was also gaining a tremendous amount of knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Because in my experiences at Starbucks, I learned to work with people. I learned to manage people. I learned to manage organizations. I learned to understand energy in different customers and what this meant versus what that meant. Some of the beginning stages of my spiritual mind came from just working behind the bar making coffee, because there was something that used to happen and I was like, why does that happen? I don't understand. And it was just the most interesting thing. And I refused to just chalk it up to like some random thing, because it would happen over and over and over again, where let's say I would be at the bar making drinks, and then an order would come in and the order would be a grande white mocha. And then someone else would come in and order a drink, and that would be a grande white mocha with 2 sugars. And then another order would come in, and these people were separate. They were not all with each other. They all would come in at separate times. And the next order would come in would be a grande white mocha, no sugar with no whipped cream, right? Or sugar free. And then in the drive-thru, I get another order on the opposite side that would be like a grande latte with 1 pump of mocha. So there was all these like weird little like synchronicities, and I would get like sometimes the same drinks back to back. I would get 3 or 4 orders of sugar-free vanilla lattes, and they would be coming from different people who weren't together, and they would be lining up. And I kept seeing those patterns over and over again. And I was always like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is that happening? And I would always wonder, and I would ask God, like, why is this happening? I want an answer to why this is happening. So for years that would happen, and I would always wonder why. Of course, it's because of, law of attraction, or energy attracts like energy. But, at the time I didn't realize that. I didn't realize what was syncing all these things together. And also me having that experience was a synchronicity for me as well. So all these years I stayed with Starbucks longer than I wanted to, but I learned a whole lot while I was there. Fast forward, I'm already at my 10 plus years, or 12 years, I think, and I was ready to go. And the experience at Starbucks was no longer a fun one. It was no longer an enjoyable one. The company had changed a whole lot since I had first started, and there was a lot happening on the in upper management, and I just didn't feel safe. My job didn't feel safe, and I came from an old school Starbucks mindset, not these newer corporate Starbucks people. So I came from a completely different mindset and culture in the company. So I was ready to go. And my first thought was I want to do this full time. Of course, I was being practical. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to pay for medical insurance. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage. I'm not going to be able to support myself or my partner if I'm doing this full time, because I don't know anyone who is able to. All the people that I knew who were psychics were only doing it part time because they had to have full-time jobs. So I wanted to have something stable and solid, even though this is what I really wanted to do. But I said, I'm just going to find another management job. So I tried going and, applying at different companies. I applied to HEB, I applied to all these different companies, and I would get callbacks and I would get interviews, and I would go through multiple interviews in several instances, but something would be created or something would happen where I wouldn't be able to go any further. And it wasn't like I'm a horrible option for them, because I have all this management experience. I have a great customer service. I know how to do customer service really well. I mean, I wouldn't have been a store manager for Starbucks for so long had I not been great at customer service. So I was definitely a great candidate, but something would happen and, thank you so much for coming to all the meetings. And I really thought you were going to be selected, but they decided they wanted to go with an internal candidate. So all these weird little walls would show up that would stop me from going further. And it happened three separate times. And at that point I was done. I was like, okay, what are you trying to tell me? Because I thought this is what I'm supposed to do to be stable and to have, a different job that maybe will make me happier. And the one thing that I didn't even want to entertain is the one thing that was left when I just got exhausted and tired. So I decided, screw it. I'm just going to throw myself into this work. I'm just going to spend a year and build up my business. And I'm due for a coffee break with Starbucks anyways. So I'm going to plan for taking my coffee break, which with Starbucks, after 10 years, you can take a year off from the company. You won't get paid for it, but you can take a year off and come back and you'll get your job back. You're guaranteed your job back after 10 years of service. So I was like, okay, I'll take my coffee break. I will spend that year and try to do my business. I'm going to save up before I do that so that if I don't make any money and if I'm not able to have a sustainable business, then at least I can pay my bills, right? So that was the mindset. So the moment that I made that decision, I was like, okay, in order for me to really, really do this, I'm going to have to own it. So immediately I set up my website, I established an email, and then I posted myself on all of the review sites. Of course, there was no reviews, right? Because I hadn't really been doing it professionally for so long, but I was ready. So I decided I was going to just focus on the business and then hope for the best. Well, it worked. It took me 1 year, like clockwork. I never had I was able to build my business. I was able to build enough of a clientele base. I went ahead and left Starbucks, never had to use my savings because I was able to support myself during that time. And so that worked out. And it worked out better than I ever expected. But it's because I read all of the walls that I was being hit by. I read all of the walls and I was able to essentially take the hint and pivot and correct myself. And that's what will happen. If you choose a path, even if it's the wrong path, the universe is going to remind you of what the chosen path was for you. And you can either choose to accept that and follow the signs, or you can choose to go against it and then get slapped back and then cry and cry and cry because the universe is punishing you, and you're the biggest victim in the world. But it's not. You've just stuck to the path that wasn't really set up for you. So take the hint and then pivot. And if you do so, you'll start to get more. If you decide, if today you've been going down a path where you keep running into brick walls, everything you've tried just isn't working. It's not working. It hasn't worked. Everything that you've been intending hasn't worked in your favor, and you're just done with it. Then what you do is pick another option that seems like the stupidest option or the easiest option or the simplest option you can think of. Because for me, when I for years could not access my psychic abilities, but for years my friend she kept recommending, why don't you take Reiki class? Why don't you take Reiki? Why don't you take Reiki? I'm like, I don't want to do Reiki. That's not what I'm interested in. I want to be a psychic. I want to be a medium. This is what I want to do. That's not what I want to do. But I could not access my abilities. So I finally gave in, took a Reiki course, got certified. And then in my first year of my Reiki internship, my abilities kicked on. And so it was the simplest option, the simplest out. So for you, if you're in that state where you've hit a brick wall, you just don't know which direction to turn in, just turn in a different direction than the one you've been going in. Just turn in a different direction. Meaning just choose something very different. It doesn't have to make perfect sense to you. Just pick something different. The moment you start moving in a completely different direction, at that moment, all of this wall, you're turning away from that. And so at this point, the universe is like, oh, they finally, it's almost like people, those robots where sometimes a robot goes up to the wall and it starts hitting it and it starts hitting it. It doesn't stop because it's stuck trying to go forward. That's what people do. So instead of that, just turn yourself to the side and you'll start moving in another direction. Focus on something different, focus on something else, try a different job. Just pick something. By the picking of something, at that point, you're going to initiate the universal process of alignment, which means if you are not perfectly aligned to the path, the chosen path, you will be given an opportunity to align with it by all of the new signs, all of the new signals, all of the new refinements and the course corrections. But pay attention and follow up with it, because that will get you back onto the chosen path. That is how you realign. And people don't understand that that's the point. So you initiated tension. Yeah, you initiated tension. You initiated tension because, you may intend to be in a great relationship, but if you've been doing the opposite of trying to be in a great relationship, then you basically sabotage yourself. So this is why I tell people when they tell me I can't find love, or when am I going to find love? I have to tell people, pick a option, pick the type that is different from yours. Whatever you're normally attracted to, whatever you're normally drawn to, pick a different option, pick a different type and go in that direction. Because by doing so, you're going to trigger the universal alignment mechanism to help you get back on track. And it'll align you to the people you're supposed to connect with. People think that we're supposed to connect with only great lovers and only great relationships. No, we came in to have a human life. That means we came in to deal with, people who are full of shit, and then we came in to deal with people who are amazing. We came in to have those both experiences because we're human. We're not just here to have crappy, just to have joyful, beautiful relationships. Whatever Disney movie you got that from, I'm gonna need you to put that DVD down because ain't nobody using DVDs anymore anyways. So I'm gonna need you just to get right in your head and just to pay attention. Because if you look at the people around you and if you look at the reality of this world, ain't nobody living a Disney movie. There are some people who have gotten close and there's some really good examples out there. Ain't nobody being Disney movie. So I need y'all to know this 100% because it's the reality of a human experience. Okay? All right, mamas. All right. Hey, beautiful. All right, sweetheart. Well, I love you all. I'm done because I have to go make dinner. I don't even know what I'm making today. I think it's like plant-based day, so we're not eating any meat today. I don't think we are. But anyways, I love you all. I'm gonna be back on Friday. But until then, y'all take care of yourselves, okay?